You have a folder on your desktop right now. You know the one. It has an innocent name, and that name is a lie. Everyone has something like this. A password nobody else knows. A text thread you delete before handing someone your phone. A specific private universe that exists only because you built a wall around it. And the question worth asking isn't whether you're strange for wanting that wall. The question is where the wall came from in the first place. Did it show up with the internet? With locks? With the invention of a door you could actually close? Or did someone flaking stone into a spear point 40,000 years ago also want, every so often, to just not be watched? Strip privacy down to its studs, and it isn't about bedrooms or Wi-Fi passwords at all. It's about control. Who gets to know something and who doesn't? That's the whole definition. Which means privacy doesn't need a lock. It doesn't need a wall, it just needs the ability to keep something back. And humans have apparently been extraordinary at keeping things back for a very, very long time. Here's a jolt worth sitting with. Researchers studying human behavior found something odd. People act more honestly, more generously when a poster of a pair of eyes is hung nearby. Just eyes. Not a real person, not a camera, a drawing. Something in the human brain treats the mere feeling of being seen as different from actually being alone, and it changes behavior instantly. If the sensation of being watched can rewire how you act in a lab in the 21st century, imagine how load-bearing that sensation must have been for a creature whose entire survival depended on its group's good opinion. And the group was always watching, because the group was always there. But even the group's ever-present eyes couldn't fully see inside anyone. Long before doors, primates were already hiding things from each other. Chimpanzees have been caught repeatedly tucking food away from a dominant male, or pretending total disinterest in a mate while a rival's back is turned, only to circle back once the coast is clear. That's not clumsy instinct. That's strategy. That's theory of mind in motion, an animal calculating what another animal doesn't know. Chimps and humans split from a common ancestor roughly 6 million years ago, which means the scaffolding for secrecy might predate language itself. Fast forward to early Homo sapiens, roughly 300,000 years back, and the evidence gets even stranger. Archaeologists keep finding graves, not just bodies dumped and abandoned, but bodies arranged with intention. Ochre pigment, shell beads, specific positioning, chosen and deliberate. You don't do that for a nameless unit of the herd. You do that for someone. A person distinct from every other person, with a life that belonged only to them. And that's the hinge everything else swings on. The instant a creature develops a concept of self, it can't help but develop a concept of mine. My thoughts, separate from yours. My story, not identical to the group's story. The architecture of a private life isn't something humans bolted on later, after civilization got complicated. It was there from the moment the first human looked at another human's grave and understood that a whole interior world had just gone quiet forever. So, picture the actual living arrangement, because it matters more than people assume. For most of human history, bands were small, 20 to 50 people. The same 20 to 50 people every day, every meal, every night, sleeping close enough to hear each other breathe. No door, no "I'll be in my room." Because there was no room. Just an ongoing, inescapable closeness that never really switched off. So was privacy simply impossible? Not quite. And this is where it gets genuinely strange. Anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups living in ways that echo our ancestors, keep documenting the same pattern across wildly different cultures on different continents. When there are no walls, people build invisible ones instead. Unspoken rules stand in for architecture. You don't look directly at someone doing certain things. You don't follow someone who's walked off alone into the trees. You don't ask certain questions, ever. Break one of those rules, and the social cost is often steeper than trespassing through an actual door, because everyone knows there's no excuse. The rule lived in the culture, not in a lock, so ignorance was never an option. Privacy, it turns out, doesn't require architecture, it requires agreement. Nowhere is that agreement more consistent than around sex. Plenty of animals reproduce in full public view, completely unbothered, no ceremony required. Humans, even the earliest ones, seem to have broken from that pattern almost immediately. Across hunter-gatherer societies studied from South America to Southern Africa to the Pacific Islands, the pattern repeats. People slip away. They wait for darkness. They make quiet arrangements in advance, even in groups with zero private sleeping space. Why bother if privacy costs this much effort? Because human sex was never just biology. It got tangled up with jealousy, status, alliance, and power almost the moment it became social. And anything tangled with power becomes something people instinctively protect from view. That instinct to protect wasn't limited to bodies. It extended to knowledge itself. In the early 20th century, an anthropologist living among the Trobriand Islanders of the Pacific documented something remarkable: garden magic. Specific spells believed to make yams grow larger, passed down through families as closely guarded secrets, never spoken aloud where an outsider might memorize them. A neighbor could see your garden. They could not have your spell. The words themselves were treated as property, hoarded the way a modern person hoards a password or formula. It's a strange, specific proof that privacy was never only about physical space. Sometimes what people protected hardest wasn't a place to be alone. It was a piece of knowledge nobody else was allowed to own. Now let's go inward, because this is where it gets genuinely philosophical. Did ancient humans have rich private thoughts? Not just the trivial fact that no one can read minds, but something deeper. Did they lie awake turning over feelings they never spoke aloud? Did they perform one face for the group and carry a completely different one underneath? Here's a piece of evidence that rarely makes it into these conversations: the false belief test. Developmental psychologists run a simple experiment on small children. A doll named Sally hides a marble and leaves the room. Another doll moves the marble somewhere else. When Sally comes back, where will she look for it? Children under about 4 almost always say she'll look in the new spot, because they can't yet grasp that Sally's knowledge is separate from their own. Somewhere around age 4, something clicks in every culture researchers have tested, and children suddenly understand that other minds hold different information than their own. That flip is the cognitive birth of privacy. The moment a human being can reliably grasp that what's in their head isn't automatically in anyone else's, the whole architecture of secrecy becomes possible. And that switch appears to be universal, not taught, not cultural. Built in. Which brings us to cave art, one of the strongest physical clues we have for an ancient inner life. The paintings at Lascaux, at Chauvet, at Altamira, some running 17 to 36,000 years old, weren't placed near the entrances where a group would gather around a fire. Many sit deep inside the rock, reachable only by torchlight through narrow, punishing passages. Nobody stumbles onto those chambers by accident. Getting there took deliberate, difficult effort, so why paint something almost no one would ever see? One compelling theory: these weren't public murals at all. They were private acts. Something closer to ritual or prayer or an early form of journaling, made for an audience of one or for whatever forces the painter believed were listening in the dark. Personal objects tell a similar story. Archaeologists keep finding stones carried hundreds of miles from their origin, ochre carved with patterns that serve no survival purpose, shells strung as jewelry with no practical function at all. These aren't tools. They're identity made physical. A way of saying this is mine without needing words, and the instant you have things that are yours, you have the possibility that someone else might take them, which means you also have hiding places and secrets about where those hiding places are. Privacy, once it starts, tends to fold in on itself endlessly. There's one more layer worth naming: the gap between the face you show and the feeling underneath it. Humans smile when they're miserable. They stay composed while panicking internally. That gap isn't a modern invention born of open-plan offices and video calls. In a group of 20 or 30 people you can never escape, managing how others perceive you isn't a courtesy. It's survival. Being seen as weak meant fewer resources. Being seen as unstable could mean exile, and exile in the Paleolithic was rarely survivable. So the interior self became something to guard carefully, deliberately, every single day. Anthropologists call this impression management, and it may be one of the oldest social technologies humans ever built. Now jump forward to around 10,000 years ago, when everything about privacy's shape changes. Farming arrives, settlements stop moving, and with permanence comes something entirely new: architecture built on purpose. Suddenly, the archaeological record shows rooms, sleeping space separated from cooking space, storage kept apart from the areas where guests were allowed to enter. The physical world starts mirroring the social one: layered, zoned, restricted. One of the clearest examples is Çatalhöyük, a Neolithic settlement in what's now Turkey, dating back roughly 9,500 years, home to thousands of people at its height. And it has a detail that stops archaeologists in their tracks: no exterior doors. None. Entry happens through a hole in the roof, down a ladder, into the house below. Every home sealed off completely from street level. Whatever the original reasoning, defense, climate, symbolism, the functional result is unmistakable. To get into someone's home uninvited, you'd have to climb down through their ceiling. That's not an accident of engineering. That's a society that had already decided thousands of years before writing existed that a home belongs to the people inside it, and entry requires permission. And once writing does exist, the record of private life gets almost uncomfortably intimate. Thousands of Mesopotamian clay tablets have survived, and a striking number of them aren't official decrees at all. They're personal letters, complaints about unreliable relatives. Business deals struck quietly behind someone's back, long simmering disputes over inheritance. One of the oldest surviving letters, dated to around 1750 BCE, is essentially a furious customer complaint about a batch of bad copper. The stakes were different. The clay was certainly harder to type on. But the underlying behavior, protecting a reputation, managing a grievance outside public view, is identical to what happens in any inbox today. Egypt adds its own twist. A civilization obsessed with monuments, permanence, and public grandeur also produced an enormous stash of private notes on limestone flakes and broken pottery. Cheap, disposable writing surfaces used by ordinary workers. Messages passed between craftsmen at Deir el-Medina, the village that built the Valley of the Kings, are full of things nobody meant for the official record: labor disputes, accusations of theft, quiet affairs, arguments over borrowed tools never returned. An entire private social world humming underneath the monumental one, and it stayed hidden for thousands of years until someone with a trowel dug it back up. Nothing, it turns out, stays private forever. That's not a modern fear, that's simply how time works. So what does all of this actually add up to? It means the urge to guard something for yourself never arrived with smartphones or social media. It didn't get invented alongside the lock or the login screen. It showed up the moment a creature became self-aware enough to realize its inner world wasn't the same as everyone else's. Whether that moment came with a burial 30,000 years ago, a cave painting made in total darkness, or a child somewhere realizing for the first time that another person doesn't know what they know. Which brings this back to you: your passwords, your playlist you'd rather not explain, that folder with the very innocent name. None of it is a strange modern excess. It's simply the newest layer on something that has been running quietly underneath the entire human story, long before anyone had a word for it at all.